shade, and the men are ready to hit this very difficult course. The wind, though, is picking up, which is something the local surfers will enjoy, but perhaps not something the men are looking forward to. And you see in the distance, just over the skyline of Honolulu there, those black clouds starting to form. A bit of weather perhaps on the way. Here are our top men heading out into the pontoon. Greg Bennett from Australia, and there's the #1 ranked American, Hunter Kemper.
Well, taking a look down, no pressure on Bennett. He's already got his Olympic spot. Hunter Kemper, the Olympian from 2000, he's going to feel the pressure today. Brad Caulfield from Australia, the former 23 and under world champion in there. Bryce Quirk, Matt Reed, Doug Freeman, one of the athletes to take a look at. Not a large field here today, but incredibly powerful number of athletes getting ready to head off the pontoon.
Well, and of course, we cannot forget the Olympic gold medalist Simon Whitfield from Canada also into this field. This is his first major race start of the season. Just checking his form, he also has his start position for Athens already secured for the Canadian team.
Well, you can take a look right there. The waves really starting to break. It is going to be a tough swim for these athletes. They're going parallel to shore. Those waves are breaking, and Andy Potts, the All-American from Michigan, really taking the swim out hard. Doug Freeman, very close on his feet, and with just 20 athletes in there, you don't want to get lost early in this swim.
Well, you can see from that side angle shot the swell out there in the water. Some of the athletes choosing to take the most direct line, while others choosing to swim a little bit out and perhaps cut back in using the current to their advantage.
Well, certainly it's athletes with great backgrounds in swimming forcing the pace right now. Andy Potts in there, Joe Umpenhauer, who has been at the National Training Center, really working hard on his swim, and you can see how aggressive it is as these athletes are going around that swim buoy.
Well, Hunter Kemper also very well positioned. He's sitting in about 3rd or 4th position. The men's race, you'll notice, quite different from the women's in that they're not splitting up the field that much. The top swimmers certainly at the front, but the rest of the field managing to stay quite closely in touch with those feet.
Christine, we had a report that Simon Whitfield was bashed going around one of those swim buoys. Very close. He took a little bit of a smack in the face. I know it's not intentional, but when you're that close going around those swim buoys, it's really important not to get left. And here's an athlete who really has improved his swimming. Doug Freeman from the United States, really that 6'5" frame, using it to his full advantage, and he is starting to pull away from Andy Potts as the athletes are coming through. You can see, however, it's a long chain and they're not very far behind each other.
Well, the two lead men, Freeman and Potts, taking two very different lines there on the course. You see one guy heading into the shore, allowing the current to pull him in, whereas Doug Freeman is choosing to go as directly as possible and perhaps use the current to his advantage. By the end of the first lap, there was little room to move in the men's field, with the early leaders unable to shake a persistent field of followers from their toes. Benefiting greatly from his early season swim form was American #1, Hunter Kemper, who was swimming in 3rd heading on to lap 2. But out in front, it was fellow Americans Doug Freeman and Andy Potts who set the early pace, with Potts managing to judge the water conditions to perfection and eventually lead the field into transition 1.
27-year-old Andy Potts in the position he wants to be, first onto the bike course. And you can see Freeman and the rest of the athletes coming behind. Joe Umpenhauer, Hunter Kemper in a great position. Mark Freda, he had a bronze medal last year in the World Cup race coming out, so very well positioned as well. And there's Simon Whitfield, the Olympic gold medalist, right into that lead pack. Greg Bennett, helmet on, so it is going to be a great opening bike leg.
Very different to what we saw in the women's field. Most of the men out of the swim together, so it will be a very big pack going out. Simon Whitfield just about to get on his bike there. And there we see Hunter Kemper. He's dropped his shoe. That is not a good sign. You don't want that to be happening in such a big race for this athlete, but he gets back on, and the key will be being able to catch up with that pack.
Well, Hunter Kemper, a very experienced athlete, and you have to be prepared to deal with any kind of stress. Taking a look up here, you can see Andy Potts getting into his cycling shoes. Most of the athletes leave their shoes right on the bike for faster transitions. Potts putting the helmet and glasses on, and taking a look here slow-mo, you can see a very stressful situation for Hunter Kemper. He realizes that his cycling shoe has fallen off. He's got it back on, back to his bike, and now he's going to have to relax, get his blood pressure and his heart rate back under control. And if he just uses the next few hundred meters, he should be right in the middle of this pack.
Well, the most important thing for Hunter Kemper after that flub out of transition is to get on with that lead pack, and there you see that he has done exactly that. And looking at the standings, Andy Potts with the best swim today, but not a fast swim at 19:04. And all those American men really in the hunt already, 5 of them into the top 6 out of the water. And as we saw earlier in the week, some former Hawaiian Olympians passing the torch to the Americans of today. Onto the bike, Hunter Kemper found himself in a world of trouble as his cycling shoe fell off at the exit of transition. We'll see if he's managed to recover as we catch up with the rest of the men's bike action. And so far, it looks like world number 1, Greg Bennett, is the man to beat through the opening laps of the 40-kilometer cycle. Well, right there on the screen, that's Greg Bennett from Australia powering his way up this hill, and he's also comfortably riding into this group because he knows his Olympic berth is already secured. So he's one of those athletes who can relax through this race, really test the legs.
Well, the 25-year-old American Seth Wheeling continuing to lead this event, but I'd have to ask the question. You can see that pack, how close they are behind him. They're just letting him burn his energy off in a solo position. Young athletes often do that. They get excited in big, important races, and you can see the gap is very narrow, and they've been behind him for now almost 5 to 6 miles. He has not made up a significant amount of time, and yet he's using up a tremendous amount of energy that he's going to need when he gets out there onto the run course.
Well, as you mentioned, a gutsy competitor, and this is often a tactic Wheeling tries. It has yet to really solidify and work for him. However, he's brave to continue on that path. Just cycling through there, these are some of the guys we're used to seeing ride ahead. Matt Reed is now riding up into that group. Andy Potts still up there into the lead. And Miles Stewart, he's got the bright yellow suit on the back from Australia. Also a very talented cyclist, starting to move his way through the field. But here we see our leader, as expected, already caught. That's Richie Cunningham from Australia, another great cyclist in the field who has caught on to Seth Wheeling.
Well, after a fantastic swim, Mark Freda was 5th out of the water. A flat tire in the very first lap has put him in a very distinct disadvantage. I know he's going to be frustrated because that wind is continuing to blow and he is all by himself out there on the course.
Well, also riding alone, this is Richie Cunningham, but he's on the opposite end of the field. This is the man leading the race right now, the Australian making a breakaway. He was a late entry into the race, just arrived with Miles Stewart, teammate, the night before. So these men now really testing this course. And there we see one of the other athletes, I believe that's Matt Reed, now starting to push the pace. But the remainder of this field just sitting in, Miles Stewart there and Greg Bennett and Simon Whitfield all sitting on the back of the pack heading up that big hill.
Well, Whitfield's a great technician, and I know that if he believed there was 3 or 4 athletes who had broken away, he would have been more concerned. But Richie Cunningham all by himself is not that big a factor.
Early on, it was Australia's Richie Cunningham who pushed the pace on the bike, making a decisive move on the hill at Kilauea. Behind him, the only man who seemed prepared to give chase was teammate Greg Bennett, who started to pull away from the main chase by the midway point in pursuit of the early leader.
They feed on danger.
Well, Cunningham, looking over his shoulder, realizes his good fortune. He's been out there for a long period of time by himself. And right now, Greg Bennett and maybe one of the best cyclists in the sport, Miles Stewart, joining. And that's the size group that you have to be worried about. A threesome really can force the pace. They can work off each other, only take 5 to 10 second pulls and let another athlete up. And Miles Stewart, an outstanding cyclist, is really going to force the pace. Right there in the red bathing suit, Greg Bennett from Australia forcing it. His teammate Miles Stewart from Australia and Richie Cunningham from Australia as well. 3 Aussies now leading this very important race.
Well, and they're athletes that these men will certainly be thinking about in the chase pack, because Miles Stewart and Greg Bennett in particular are very pedigreed athletes with many victories between them. Miles Stewart starting to take charge, and there we see them just rounding the corner and heading up that monster hill on Kilauea. That's Miles Stewart right in the front with the green back to his suit. Greg Bennett, you see them up out of the saddle. They have climbed this hill 4 times already on the course, so these men working very hard and very well together. Looking back down the field, you see the kind of distance they've been able to make up on this chase pack, and no one seems very prepared to go just yet or really push the pace. That's Simon Thompson from Australia just leading that pack up the hill.
Well, Simon Thompson, a fantastic runner. He's made the Australian Olympic team, and he ran away from almost everybody. Miles Stewart looking over his shoulder, Greg Bennett right there, and as they look down the hill, and it is an incredibly steep hill, they're down by almost 200 meters. That's going to be a time of probably about 40 seconds by the time they get to the end of this 5th lap.
The men in the chase pack having to work a little bit harder to stay clear of one another riding up that hill. Miles Stewart, though, looks very relaxed already at the top. He knows he's got the downhill ride now, and that's where this little pack of 3 will make up some time on that chase pack coming up the hill behind them. The 3 Aussie leaders worked well together over the remainder of the challenging 5-lap course, climbing the hills with relative ease and continually increasing their lead over the main chase pack. A pack that contained all of the top Americans, each one with his eye on Athens and paying little attention to the Australian contingent at the head of the field.
The way these 3 Australians are racing, you'd have to ask whether it's the Australian Olympic Trials race. They're coming off 1, 2, 3. Miles Stewart, Greg Bennett having a fantastic opening ride. Also in there, Richie Cunningham, and the American athletes, only 1 spot for them to go to Athens on Team USA, down by about 50 seconds, and 3 fantastic athletes heading out onto this very, very tough run course.
Well, there we see Simon Whitfield in the blue, Hunter Kemper with the distinct red top on, just sitting in, relaxing. They've had a very tactical, very smart race so far, and you see through that picture there, the chase pack not that far behind, because here are 3 leaders just heading out onto the run.
32-year-old Greg Bennett lives in Canada, represents Australia, has won events all over the world, currently out onto the course, and there, in the red singlet, Hunter Kemper, the Olympian from 2000, shoes on, getting ready to head out onto the course, and one of his biggest nemesis, Simon Whitfield, also just heading out as well.
American Doug Freeman just struggling in transition a little bit, just getting the helmet off there and heading out. Seth Wheeling, one of the early leaders, heading out behind him, but Greg Bennett is already well into this run, and over the last few years, his run has been what has clinched events for him. He's so solid out there, even after a difficult bike.
Well, that group of 3 have a significant lead going out onto the course, almost a minute. It's going to take some very, very hard running coming up from behind. This man has won events on every continent. He was the athlete that won on the Sydney Olympic Games course just a year before the Olympic Games and then did not make that team. Taking a look, it's Australians 1, 2, 3 off the bike, and then a whole slew of American athletes, and they're down by just under a minute as they go out onto the 10K run course.
Here we see the man in the lead so far, Greg Bennett, looking very smooth. The rain has actually started to come down, which is very nice for these men now that they're off the bike, where it can be a bit dangerous. On the run, though, it's cooling things down just a little.
Miles Stewart now just circling at the end of the course as he goes back. The athletes have a great opportunity to take a look. And there, Richie Cunningham holding his side. He worked so hard on that bike on a solo breakaway, was assisted by 2 other Australians, and right now it looks like it's all for naught. But the pressure's on this man right there. Hunter Kemper just coming around with the red singlet. Michelle Vivian also just behind him as he goes. And there's maybe one of the finest runners in the sport, Simon Whitfield, with the Nike swirl in the middle of his singlet as he goes around and takes off down by about 15 seconds to Hunter Kemper.
Brad Caulfield from Australia into the mix there as well, and Andy Potts, who's traditionally been best at the swim and the bike, having a great run as well. And here we see Miles Stewart looking very, very smooth as Greg Bennett actually starts to slow back. Miles Stewart just blowing past him and now taking over the lead.
One of the things that we heard from Greg Bennett was that he wasn't going to come early into the season in such hard, great shape. He took some time in February after he made the Olympic team back into his retraining phase. In fact, the man with the blue singlet there, Simon Whitfield, is his training partner in Victoria, British Columbia. The 2 of them will be fantastic training partners getting ready for the Athens Olympic Games. This man not going to the games, as we said, so he has something to prove. He wants to knock off every athlete that has a chance to go to the Olympic Games to show that at 32 years of age, he's still in the best shape of his life.
Well, Miles Stewart has never missed a world championship since he took up the sport of triathlon. He's been to every one since the official one back in 1989 in Avignon, France. So certainly one of the most pedigreed athletes out there in the field. And here we see Hunter Kemper and Simon Whitfield now about to pass Greg Bennett. So Bennett really not having the run that we would expect of him, but Hunter Kemper looking very, very smooth, very well positioned. And look at Simon Whitfield. He always looks so relaxed when he is on. We know when he's in shape, when he's relaxed, and he's running smoothly. quickly.
Well, absolutely. It looks like prime Simon Whitfield. Again, remember, this is his first race out of the block, so he wants to see where his fitness is at a few months before the Olympic Games. These two athletes, what an absolute battle they have had over the years. Well, Miles Stewart played a big part of Simon Whitfield's career. The guy leading right here, he and Whitfield had two very, very weak swims at the Sydney Olympic Games. They got together on the bike and rode themselves up to the lead pack, where eventually Whitfield ran himself onto the Olympic Games gold. And now you see three of the brightest stars in the sport. Australia's Miles Stewart in the one-piece suit. Just behind him, about 8 seconds behind, Hunter Kemper trying to run himself onto the team for USA for Athens. And then Whitfield running very relaxed, knowing that on at least 4 other occasions he has run away from Hunter Kemper over the last few hundred meters to win the overall championship. Most of Hunter Kemper's silver medals have come to Simon Whitfield.
Well, they're both looking very, very smooth. Simon Whitfield now moving into second, and Hunter Kemper pushing up the tempo. Miles Stewart looking as though he's tiring just a little bit, takes a look over his shoulder and doesn't appear to have any gas left in those legs to go with them. Simon Whitfield looking incredibly relaxed out there, a bit of a smile on his face, just comfortable, chest up and forward. Hunter Kemper starting to falter just a little bit perhaps, but this is the biggest race. He has the whole world, or at least the whole map of the United States, resting on his shoulders right now. He desperately wants that spot in Athens, so he has the most pressure here. Whitfield just looks to be out for a great training run.
Well, Simon Whitfield, when he is on, I believe is the finest runner in the sport. Ivan Rania certainly has had some great runs over the last few years, but when Whitfield is on, he may be the finest triathlete runner in the world. He has put in some of the best times consistently, and you can see he picks his moment. Sometimes it's the sprint like he did in Sydney. Other times he picks his moment almost a mile from the finishing line, as he's done in races like the Edmonton World Cup event. He knows he's a great technician. He listens to the breathing patterns of the other athletes around him, and when he realizes that they're suffering the most, that's when he pulls away.
Once in the lead, Simon Whitfield settled into a comfortable rhythm and never looked back. Behind him, the top American Hunter Kemper sat solidly in second, content with his position in the race and already looking ahead to a starting spot in Athens. And sitting in third, a resurgent Miles Stewart continued to hold down the last spot on the podium.
Whitfield started this day off with a battle in the water where he took a couple of punches in the side of the head, but he was able to maintain his composure, get on that bike, and now it is all the beautiful running prowess is Whitfield from Victoria, British Columbia, just running away from the American Hunter Kemper, both of them looking over their shoulders, and Whitfield realizing that he's got another victory. And how many times has Hunter Kemper looked at the backside of Simon Whitfield? 1:55.50, 31:13, and here comes a man heading to Athens on Team USA. Hunter Kemper's securing that second across the line, first American, and Miles Stewart, after having an year of injuries, showing that he is still one of the best athletes in the world. The 32-year-old Australian crossing line 1:56.09.
Well, coming up behind him in fourth, this is Brad Caulfield, another athlete who had a breakthrough season last year with a couple of podium finishes in the World Cup Tour. But Simon Whitfield, certainly this was a classic Simon Whitfield race. He had a consistent swim. He was 10th out of the water. He sat in on that pack, did a bit of work, came 10th off the bike, and of course that blistering fast run, 31:13.
Two pumped-up Americans, Hunter Kemper in red, he secured his spot for Athens, and Andy Potts, he's got his spot for the Madeira World Championships. Simon Whitfield, followed by Hunter Kemper from the United States, then two Aussies, Miles Stewart, Brad Caulfield, and American Andy Potts leading out the top 5 overall.
Well, the top 6 American men and the top 6 American women qualify from this race for the American Worlds team, and that is, of course, another race where another American athlete will be selected for the U.S. team heading to Athens in August.
We're at a phase in training where we were expecting to run pretty well, but not brilliant. I think the Americans running for spots played a little bit into that. Hunter has quite a few more gears than that.
It's what I came here to do, was to make the American team, and I was able to get it done. You know, I definitely wasn't on all the way today. I was on the bike. I was pretty tired and didn't feel the best, but I knew that, you know, even if I didn't feel that great, I still was able to I had the fastest run in against the Americans, and I got the job done, you know.
So while 2 Olympic champions from 4 years ago celebrate with their young fans at the end of the race, America welcomes its first 2 members to their Athens team. Hunter Kemper sealed his spot in a classic battle on the run against Simon Whitfield, while Barb Lindquist overcame her demons of 4 years ago and in typical Lindquist style led the race from start to finish. Next up for us, it's off to sunny Mazatlan in Mexico for round 3 of the 2004 series.
Forest, your bros for life.